yes, and start to panic. Here, namely, roughly speaking, we control it all. We control our minds, we control our own here. More precisely, not even the mind, emotions and feelings. In other words, we are already beginning to control this process. We keep ourselves in hand. We keep ourselves in hand. She's holding our skull. Here is another one in which she also holds clear too, again for this we respect, for which our Shiva is also. And in another one she holds the scripture. We remember, yes, that, well, the texts say again, that the goddess of speech sits there. This is exactly what this scripture embodies, that here we can, as it were, already transmit knowledge. That is, we possess not only knowledge, true knowledge, we can also transmit it. Also on this chakra, we can receive this knowledge from our goddess. In another one she holds an arrow. Here. Well, that again personifies the ascension over these here. You know, an arrow is considered to be the arrow of the god Kama, sensual pleasures. And she also holds it in her hands again, as a sign that she is already above these sensual pleasures, she is already above them. Here is such a thing. Yeah, great thanks. So, look here, friends, here. What a thing. More about the elephant. Yes, now. Come on, come on, come on, come on. One more drop about the elephant. That's because the elephant, in fact, was still with us on the Manipura chakra. Manipura, Muladhara chakra, below. But there was an elephant named Araivara, and he had 7 trunks. That's what personified this lowly ability, something that is always owned, as it were, by a person on the lower chakras. There are already all these feelings of his, all of his needs here. Aspiration, aspiration. Yes, aspiration. That's right, yes. It seems to connect into one, and it turns out that he is already, as it were, over it all. He has one reason that emits this sound, the pure sound of pure space. That's why he is exactly in this form with one trunk. Wonderful. Friends, look at how yoga was transmitted. And why are we stalling in the knowledge of yoga in the West? Yes, because it was transmitted in such images. Sometimes in a non-verbal way through pictures, through certain allegories, myths. Come to India, visit an ancient temple. Well, you see there is something image. For you it's well, someone drew something and put something there. And for the Hindu, everything has an allegorical meaning, and more than an allegorical meaning. Therefore, at one time, everyone rushed to India, hoping that now they would find a borax from the Himalayas somewhere there, at a reasonable price, and he would initiate them into all the secrets of yoga. And they were extremely disappointed. They just didn't reach a common language. On different these, in different universes. I'm there sometimes. It came to jokes. I remember once this very new Russian went to tell me from reliable sources, went there to some sacred place. They say there's a sacred mountain there, there's something. And there are all the Indians around with a gasp, like some kind of local Kailasa. Is this a stump or something? This is garbage, dirt, is it sacred? But what about all these superpowers? What about those from the Himalayas, all these yogs? Then, this is the sacred lake. Is this the one with frogs croaking in it? Sacred lake, right? That is, we are, as it were, you know, we are a little bit in the West, and now we do not have a docking. We have such an internal representation of ourselves. And we expect something. Well, in general, there will be a wow there. We arrive well, a puddle like a puddle, a sacred lake, a hill like a hill, a sacred mountain. Here. And we just don't understand that this allegorical connection is going on right here. Now, on the other hand, every attribute, every symbol that you see there, they have a semantic load. Quite unambiguously. In one way or another, it is connected with one or another manifestation of the structure of our body. Therefore, if it is good enough to know the mythology and this graphics, then you can learn a lot of things without asking while in India. Without asking. And they appreciate people who know without asking. They appreciate it. Well, they're like on the same mentality. That is, when you don't break into a temple there with your shoes on or something. Well, there are a lot of such nuances. I once broke in on my own stupidity. There's one. They all made such a fuss. Well, really, an ancient temple, but I didn't even realize a little bit that this was already where the courtyard ended, the temple began. It wasn't very obvious, because sometimes there's a temple there, it's a pebble lying under a tree, and that's it, right? Well, sometimes there's some kind of add-on. And God knows where it is possible in shoes, where it is impossible. Especially you go with a backpack, they're on the luggage somewhere in the mountains there. Well, it's already sickening, isn't it? Mountain sickness, thin air. And then you have to look at your feet, where the temple began, where it ended. Here, and it's clear that then you begin to understand it all. So, iconography, images, all these mantras, yantras, written, drawn, they carry quite specific certain instructions. Let's say Shiva draws blue throats, supposedly that when nectar was produced, poison was formed. So that he didn't kill anything, Shiva drank it. His body has become the body. The throat turned blue. Here. Therefore, one of such allegorical names of Shiva is blue-throated. Everyone will say, well, there's the temple of Blue Gorlev. And you think, my God, what is this about? Has anyone ever heard of the firmware, but about the blue head? Not really. So again, allegorically, a word can be a poison that kills everything and everything. There are poisonous people. Oh, ugh, it's disgusting. And as soon as they open their mouths, it would be better if he kept silent. And vice versa, nectar is revitalizing, saving. Again, the word. Then there is the next such paraphernalia very strange. Here is Mikhail in this picture, here as it were, the ideas from some treatises are summarized. And there are other treatises, images concerning the Vishuddha chakra, in particular, this is the image of Sadashiva. This is generally a very strange image for a European, half man, half woman. Sometimes they depict it, so one side is female, the other side is male. I mean, what is it in general? What kind of incomprehensibility is this, right? Here. But in fact, again, this is exactly, including one of the personifications, that it is like such a high level, where consciousness and energy are so intertwined that it is impossible to separate them from one another. Like in mantra yoga, where energy and consciousness are together, almost pure prana. Here. And so on and so forth. There are a lot of these attributes here, which, if for you any image is a whole treatise. A whole treatise. You can meditate, contemplate, and you understand allegorically what they wanted to say to you. That's why pay more attention to all the images, but first of all, of course, to the ancient ones. Although there is also such a science, how to depict the faces of all these gods in India. Everything is very strict there. Try to draw something wrong there. Oh, there's the wrath of Icarus. That's wonderful. So now let's go further. Here was the question. What does it mean to awaken the chakra? No, not as a question. Master the chakra, awaken the chakra, or use the chakra. Well, let's start in order. There is such a term in yoga. First of all, in Kundalini Yoga, it is to dissolve the chakra. This is when the Kundalini energy wakes up completely and consistently dissolves the chakra behind the chakras of the lowest, reaching Vishuddha. This is actually the dissolution of the canvas on which everything else was painted. The same process allegedly happens to you at the moment of death, when you are already dying in this life, and you gradually begin. Well, first, as you remember, your gross body falls off from your subtle bodies. Well, really, a corpse. Actually, only the shell remained there. And all the subtle bodies, they are disconnected. Therefore, you know, it is not customary to pay much attention to corpses in India. This is more of a Western idea, you know. And not even a Russian idea. In Russia, as far as we remember from the chronicles, they love to burn. But to bury, I do not know since when it went. Well, until now, here is Lenin's mausoleum. As a matter of fact, well, you know, here is the deification of the body. This is something completely strange, which, in fact, was not characteristic of either Russia or India. Where it came from is not clear. More precisely, where it came from is clear. That is, the fact is that when certain saints lived, they rebuilt their body so much during their righteous life, and with all sorts of techniques that are akin to ethical ones, that it did not disintegrate after death. And they say, relics, but here are the relics of the saints. Here. Yeah, there's this one. Come on, so that. That's it, on the hall, now you can play with it. So, it is clear that the saint died, and the body does not decompose. And so it became associated somewhere in the subconscious with S. It was S. As if with holiness. But from a formal point of view, well, yes, maybe he really has something. Sort of. If we are not saints with you, but ordinary people, then, in fact, there is no special meaning in the body, in the corpse. Moreover, it is believed that even sometimes it interferes. Because, you know, there are such very imaginative representations that the soul sees its body from the outside, tries to revive it. But it does not revive. And on the contrary, it means even more that this most nervous shock is already there from the higher spheres, right? So, well, what happened? At the level, as it were, as we already understand, the Vishuddha chakra, the space of our internal structures, is separated from our physical space with our physical body. And in the future, the following processes begin, which already lead to the fact that already subtle moments disintegrate, and at a certain stage, the principle associated with the principle of space also seems to disintegrate. So in Kundalini Yoga, you can, as it were, partially experience the same state of awakened Kundalini energy that a person experiences at death. In general, I have such a guess that all our narratives about the yogs of dying, they were mostly received by yogs who through Kundalini Yoga. They gained this experience, then came back and told me. Because an ordinary person, if he has survived death, he does not return. All sorts of stories about being there somewhere and then coming back. It means he's not completely dead, you know. Here. So, look further, what happens? This is the most radical way. See, here's my Zai. Here it is the younger generation. There is. Here's who's going to be sitting here soon. Yes, my distance. But another question arises. And if you have energy in the removal is not about. Out. That's it. Remember everything. Yes. Here. The joy of mastering, as they say, Mishutka. My joy. Yes, he told me everything. Then there is a moment when, first of all, you begin to feel this center inside yourself and identify it, as far as you can focus on it, and generally know that you have it. What we usually learn about the Vishuddha chakra after we have read the treatises. Before that, we had a general idea of what I had there at the base of my throat. So, after you begin to feel and understand how everything is done there, and how it is all managed, you have the ability to use these hidden mechanisms in one way or another. And here is already such a next gradation, as that awareness of the awakening of use, to one degree or another. Well, in fact, here it is very interesting. But it's really very interesting, this experience here. As you begin to concentrate on this chakra, you mentally begin to clear all channels and centers, and understand how everything is done there. And understanding how everything is done there, manage it. And it is very interesting to read here the experience of Ram Krishna, who accordingly described his knowledge of this plane, this level of the throat. Please. Words of delight and blessing burst out of my throat. I never stopped praising the Lord, and if anyone talked about pleasure and possession, his words removed me like a rod. It was so strong that when one of my relatives came to consult on family matters, I ran away and hid in the Panchavati bushes. The friends who tried to hold me seemed to me like a well, where I was pulled by my feet. I was suffocating in the depths of a dark hole. I could only find peace by looking at them. In a word, in this valley of intolerance and love for everyone, we need to pass it. So look here, yes, very interesting remarks. There is no tolerance and love at this level. Indeed, when you own the power of words, there is a giant tool for managing other people, everything in general. But you enter into such ecstasy from this word that you are somewhere again disconnected from the feeling of this world. And you don't have love, you don't have the desire, well, to feel. As they say, for the sake of a red word, remember, right? A saying. You don't remember, do you? That is, you don't have any love. That is, for the sake of a red word, he will not regret his father either. Sometimes people get into such a rush when they start saying that they sometimes say very scary things, but they don't feel the horror of everything. That is, as if there is no understanding of others with all their pains, problems. There is no tolerance, and for the level of yoga or ijin, there is no level of tolerance. That is, everyone around is some half-finished sheep. They are talking all sorts of nonsense, and I have to listen to it. And it hits the ears. And I don't want to listen. And I don't want to be around together. And I don't want to delve into any of these problems. Everything seems so painful, so somehow everything is not interesting, as Rama Krishna describes, as if you were pulled into a dark well, to the very bottom, and you don't want to go there. Here. Well, as you understand, there is nothing good, there is nothing bad. There are appropriate and inappropriate. Therefore, on the one hand, this is an extremely useful quality in some life situations. Well, let me explain what I mean. Let me remind you of the previous seminars, where, by the way, were these books. They were cleaning up the books while Senechki was there. About what? Removed. It is necessary to sell. So, friends, I recommend it. Where? Where are the books? Let me prepare it just right. What kind of seminar is this already with us? I don't remember. We have considered it before. For the first seminar. In my opinion. We have a sixth. So, I recommend this to you. This is the biggest seminar. There are probably 2 seminars at once, yes. The first one, yes, entered. So this is according to the first seminar, there are basic principles. And who wasn't? How much? Price. The price is free. No, it's free about nothing. Everyone is starting to be afraid. What price do you want in a box for a ruble? No, come on, let's assign the minimum. 50 rubles. 50 and more. Yes, that's it, agreed. From 50 and more. I recommend it. So, look what kind of thing turns out. Muladhara fear, Svadhisthana lust, Manipura anger. Anahata what?
Jealousy.
Jealousy and the desire to possess. Here you are. You're something? My little book. I won't give it back. Where did you come to? In her head, did they come to the 3rd grade or to Manipura? No, I won't give it back. That is, in fact, by such simple enough reactions, you can understand a lot of things. Here. And sometimes this jealousy and desire for possession plays a very stupid service with us. We should have uncoupled and forgotten. And we grabbed, pressed, and that's it. And so they clung tightly, as they say. This concerns some things. It sometimes concerns some kind of status, position. It very much concerns relationships with relatives and friends. Sometimes a husband clings to his wife like that, it's impossible to tear her off at all. Well, okay, it should be a wife. But you just met a random person. Or vice versa, someone. The mother clung to the child like that. You know, these hugs are already starting to choke the baby. We must also give freedom, and not just my non-possession, right? And again, there is a good-bad thing about it. With regard to the husband of the wife, that you are clinging to your wife and not letting her, and it can be good. And if you cling to someone else's wife, well, a joke. Of course, if you are clinging to something or someone wrong, it also happens. Or well, you know that's not it. And you understand, you sometimes understand yourself. In hindsight, we all actually understand what's going on somewhere. And you can't do anything with yourself. You can't, that's all. And a knife to the heart. There's my nice and new rattle. I won't give it to anyone. And only when you start from the level of Vishuddha chakra, mastering this principle, concentration, awareness, mantras, exhortations, repetition leads to the fact that you overcome this feeling. In other words, it turns out that each higher chakra eclipses the previous one. Lust, fear, anger of lust. The desire to possess overshadows anger. On the one hand, we can swear at someone, on the other hand. Both in a good way and in a bad way. And then the next thing is that when there is a question of possession, and it is very difficult, then climbing to the Vishuddha chakra, you seem to be from the position of the height of the Vishuddha chakra, and you say, Lord, what did I grab? But don't. And there is the ability to pull away. Here. In other words, this is a very important quality. It is very. Remember, yes, that you want to control the previous one. Start working with the next one. Do you want to develop the next one? With what? From the previous one, yes. It seems to me that the reason for schizophrenia of students is when they accidentally fall on this chakra, right? No, the cause of schizophrenia can be very different. The reason may be very different. Here comes a student, we don't know his background. When everyone comes, it seems that everyone is the same. But this is the outer layer, and everyone has the same depth as not. Different layers of prehistory. Therefore, it can be different. Maybe there. Yes. So, now there's something else, something. Yes, questions, friends. Part-time student. Yes. Dmitry Anna Kirsanova. Regarding Nayas and chakras, is it possible to say that the tactile level of interaction between a man and a woman is higher than the sexual one? Well, let's ask you questions, friends. In general, the question of sexuality is one of the most difficult in yoga. There is pure sexuality, and there is a manifestation of sexuality. Pure sexuality is boundless, like the whole universe. In pure sexuality, there is everything, and all chakras are involved without exception. But in some characteristic manifestations of sexuality, one thing, then another, then a third comes to the fore. Roughly speaking, there the trigger or detonator to the emergence of sexuality can be both a touch and a word, which means pronounced and a lot of everything, as well as the image of a beautiful goddess and everything. But it's just, well, like an entrance. Sexuality itself, friends, it does not come down to any chakra. Well, so that you understand what we are talking about, remember, what is sexuality? Sexuality is, in fact, the channel through which a new universe is born. Children are born in all its spectrum. Sexuality, therefore, cannot be reduced to any one chakra. So working with all the chakras can both contribute to sexuality, and vice versa, its suppression. Let's say tactile touches can both open the way to sexuality, and vice versa, help sublimate sexuality into something higher. Images, words, and so on and so on. That's why there is no such link here, if we are talking about pure sexuality. As for blocking, there. Well, you know an example. Husband and wife argued, quarreled. The husband climbs to hug, and the wife, don't touch me. That is, after what he told her, she doesn't want to be touched. You understand, right? Once the blockage passes immediately. Here. So, are there any more questions there? He is interested in whether it is possible to purchase literature by mail here. Oh, we have a patient. Friends, students, especially full-time students. Here we once had an online yoga store. But here's some kind of black hole. They take it up and throw it. Already 5 people. They took it and threw it. I give it to you. You will earn a couple of dollars or something rubles there. I'm just happy. No one. Here I need a person who would take over our online store. No, this is not the right online store. It's different. This is ours. That online store will be ready in another year because there is a database there. I mean our little, modest one.
Or maybe it should be attached to a large one.
Yes, we will definitely do that later, but when he is ready, something I understand that. No, there's another question. But this is another topic. The question there is that they need to be purposefully engaged. There is no one now. There the programmer has to sit there to screw up payment systems, but therefore, even earlier, we could easily do it, send it. Now it's just that no full-time student wants to get involved with this. No one needs money in principle. You understand, right? So the store closed. As soon as there is a full-time student, because, well, again, it is necessary to send out from here. Who will undertake it? That's it, I promise. We divide all profits and losses 50-50. With me. Share. Nobody wants to open mine. 50-50. Everything is fair. Nobody wants to. Here. Everyone will want to. No one would want to. I didn't offer. But in extreme cases, in fact, you can contact any student and ask him to send it simply. Well, this is an extreme case, I mean. What? In general, you can buy it at a field seminar if you come here. So, okay, any more questions? And 4. Bugayev asks the question. If they are rude, then the Russian word ham has something to do with mom. Here's a really interesting question. In general, an interesting linguistic question is, why these or those say bija mantras? It's an interesting topic, isn't it? Hamster, ham, right. In general, it is necessary to reflect on this. It's good in general. There may be, in the sense of its abija, the sound of some pedal on some chakra, and then, like for the end. No, well, there's most likely a speech center, and a hamster like that. Usually a hamster's tongue, right. Here. Yes, an interesting thought. We need to reflect. In general, in fact, studies of linguistics and the origin of languages. It's such an interesting activity, friends. You just can't imagine how words passed from one language to another. So, in general, all these hypotheses are official, unofficial, semi-official, about the origin there. That all languages arose from a single Berryan foreign language, which then began to branch. About that, well, yes, they say, Indo-European roots. But in fact, all languages have been brought together now, as far as I know. True, someone claims that this is not the case, but this is a difficult question. There among, in the academic environment, there is its own party, yes, but it's very interesting, yes. Any further questions? Yes, please.
Love and jealousy are considered to be on the Hata chakra. As Roma said, there is no love, no patience at the level of Vishuddha. Right.
Detachment?
Detachment, as it were, turns out
Coldness. Where?
the love that exists at the level of the Anahata chakra. It is as soon as, let's say, some facet of the manifestation of something. Let's say, as falling in love, as a state that, what this world is based on, falling in love.
No, if we mean love, and falling in love, as really what this whole world is based on. And this factor, let's call it the factor of life in another way, manifests itself through any chakra. Not necessarily to the hut, but through all the others.
Is there a guarantee?
No, there is no such border here. Here, as if separately, look here, there is what is called the highest. Well, if we consider it from the standpoint of the yoga of falling in love, there is a certain higher meaning of this world, which is called the highest transcendental love, or the highest transcendental love. And it can manifest itself through all the chakras. Here. And there are, as they say, pronounced manifestations, just like shells. Therefore, through the Anahata chakra, love can manifest itself, as well as over there, love, but it can also be a shell, for just the desire to possess. Similarly, the Vishuddha chakra can be both a container through which the Supreme shines, and a container for something very ordinary. In other words, in this respect, you know, there is such a situation, that the manifestation of the Supreme is elusive. Only it seems to you that you have caught her, the bird of happiness by the tail, in one or another chakra, do you understand? And since the gold disappeared, what was left in his hands? Shards. Not shards, there's usually something left. Embers. Embers, yes. Here. Therefore, there is a slightly different one here. Such a moment. So, is there more? Yes, please.
There is a state when, let's say, you feel detached, you feel that you don't love anyone.
Yes, and how there I heard with such that I don't want to listen to anyone. Yeah, sort of.
Although it was interesting to you before.
Is it possible to say that it is?
Well, this chakra works, right? Or is it already simple?
No. Here with regard to Ramakrishna's experience, there was a little bit different. That he was on the threshold of something so much more grandiose that compared to this grandiose. Everything ordinary earthly is like a prison, like, well, something burdensome to you. Here, if in ordinary life we have such that, well, here we are in this state, then this is certainly a completely different manifestation. It's from another, well, as if from another. The consequence of some other things. That there really is such a situation, when from some point on, well, you absolutely don't care about everyone and everything. But this, in general, does not mean that you have reached any spiritual heights. Unfortunately, he is also a very common mistake. He believes that a yogi should be frostbitten, it hurts someone there. But he should say, well, that's right, you have such stupid karma. Someone feels good, someone is happy, but supposedly he should say, why should I be happy with you? I had to be impassive, unperturbed. In other words, they are trying to imagine a yogi as such. You know, here is a piece of wood that is not cold, not hot. No, that's not right. Here. But on the other hand, that is, when it is an appropriate manifestation, when you get involved in a situation. Only when you consider it necessary to get involved, then yes, this is the highest thing. That is, so that it is, well, roughly speaking, that if you just have such a state piled on you, regardless of your will, then this most likely action speaks about your karma. It should be completely under your control, so that you can turn it off at any moment, turn it on at any time. Do you understand? That's when it's yoga. And when there's just something wrong with you, well, the condition has found uncontrolled from you, then it is rather the consequences of some previous actions. So wonderful? Yes, please. When they say that, well, there are no words for the expression. It can be both in relation to something bad there, and in relation to something very good, let's say, beautiful, there are no words there. But at this moment, how does it work? Well, extreme surprise. Yes, extreme surprise that. Well, the same Ramakrishna has a very interesting continuation of this narrative about what he said, that guys, I can't tell you. As they say, such a bike goes. He gathered his students, and when asked, what are the chakras, Kundalini, and how it all works, he did this. Allegedly, he awakened the energy of Kundalini, lemonation, we do not know about it. He felt what was happening to him, and started talking. And so he described all the chakras, one state from another to another, until he rose above the Vishuddha chakra in the realm of the mind, then he fell silent. And then, when he came out of this state, he would say, guys, you understand, right? When I awaken this state there, it is so grandiose that my tongue is silent on this state of the Buddha, yes. It's beyond, it's unspeakable, right? So maybe, yes, but only this is in relation to the good. That's about the bad. It seems to me that the bad thing is just the opposite going down, that I have only emotions, there is nothing even to say anymore. Oh yeah. Moo is not articulate. And break the dishes, right? Yes. Condition, right. So that's it then. Yes, please, yes.
But I want to voice my question. I do not know if he has such an answer, but since we are talking about Ramakrishna, I noticed that I read autobiographies, including Ramakrishna and other teachers. There is such a coincidence, a discrepancy, that they were dying of throat cancer. It was written died of throat cancer, and so I thought, maybe it has something to do with the work of the chakra bear too.
Well,
I wonder in general, what is the reason for this? But this is such a rhetorical question.
No, well, friends, you know, here you have to understand that. But someone came up to me even before the seminar about a person with a throat had problems. He's not at the seminar right now. Well, a friend came up, and he says, my throat was disappearing then. Well, after advertising that we would have a corresponding seminar, he came up and said, you know, I have problems with my throat. My voice disappears, then it arises. But I've already decided. Well, I asked how. Hooray. Well, I was there at a lecture alone, where Vedic culture was taught, and they just told me, and you have problems with your throat because you're lying. In a past life, or in this one, right? Friends, there is nothing more monstrous and incommensurable than such parallels. Well, in terms of wanting to have a lot of money, dollars. We're all green. Because dollars are green, similar to similar will be collected. Or there, if you have a problem with something, then you used it incorrectly. This is just complete idiocy. Or if you were burned in a gas chamber in a concentration camp, it means that you burned someone yourself in a previous life. That's it, one. That's it. This is an absolutely unambiguous explanation. I do not know what combinations of cause and effect there are, yes, in particular, especially with regard to, say, the same Ramakrishna, for the simple reason that, in response to a direct question from the students, this, by the way, has been preserved, he was asked, and like, well, first of all, why is this happening to you? He answered it very transparently, but said, imagine if I were not one of you, but showed some kind of over my condition. You would, he told the students, would not even get to me. Because I would be swarmed like flies by those who strive for wealth, power, strength, who are striving for this external thing. That's why he said I was very Give me mine. I am glad that this situation is for the simple reason that there are devotees around me. And all of them accidentally disappeared. My joy. What is it? The creature. My joy. Here. So, you know, this is such primitivism that if someone died from this, then he did this and that. This can only give birth, you know, to an obscurantistic, not sharpened, inflamed consciousness. Well, you know, it's obscurantism in its purest form, to associate one with the other. We don't know. Especially everything that concerns such personalities as, say, Vivekananda, friends. All right, Ramakrishna is my joy. He lived 60 years. He reached the highest samadhi there when he was almost 20, right? And he taught everyone for the remaining 40 years. Then I just realized that there was no one to teach anymore. Ramakrishna died at the age of 41. More precisely, he did not die, but left. I gathered everyone, said goodbye to everyone. That. Jontant. Yes. And he did so very much. He had a lot of Christian followers, which means that he did something, some kind of ritual. Washed their hands or something, I don't remember, something like that. Kind of like this. Yes. Here. He gathered everyone in meditation, started doing practice, fell on his side, and left in the presence of everyone. That's it. I said goodbye to everyone, said, guys, that's it. I've done everything here that we can't judge. And someone will say, yes, his Kondrashka was enough there. You know, right. What was he doing? Why did you fall on this side, right? Probably, he pushed others with this side. He fell on this side, and died on this one. Well, friends, you know, this is such an obscurantist zombifying thing, well. Some kind of superstitious feeling, like this is not even a feeling, this is a way of thinking. And it's very sticky, very sticky. As soon as you know, I assure you, as soon as you are given a book of bad signs to read, you will instantly have bad ones. Even if they weren't bad before, they will be. This is some kind of archaic property of our brain to relate to some very subtle signs that are not yet grasped by the mind. But something has to be done. This probably allowed us to survive. But at some stage, it plays a bad service. Therefore, you remember, yes, the approach in yoga, from stupidity, through logic to superlogic. Therefore, I do not know what Ramakrishna did so bad or good there. But I would not put it so unambiguously. In the end, you know, here we need to look at the whole situation as a whole. So, is there more? Yes, please. I understand that the ability to fantasize is associated with this chakra, am I right? The ability to fantasize. Well, as if to create a certain space, another. No, it's understandable, yes. But you see, here after all, the ability to fantasize is probably more for the mind. But a receptacle for fantasies, like a canvas for an artist. Well, probably, yes. Well, that's the question. Fantasy is actually the ability to combine certain visual images. Well, not necessarily. For musicians, these are sometimes sounds, for people tactile sensations. Yes, a special case. But we can recreate the images that we saw once. And here is the link, respectively, with manicure, that is, how is the perception of images? No, you know, right. One more time. This is more a space of imagination, a receptacle where, strictly speaking, all the ingredients of the previous chakras can be placed. Well, imagine now. So let's turn on the space of imagination. Is everyone sitting down now? Everyone sat down. Everyone sat down. They straightened their back, neck, head, and closed their eyes. They closed their eyes. We concentrated and imagined how you cut a lemon. Lemon. Lemon? Sour like this in general, here it is in general, yes. And then you squeeze it out. You immediately have a response, an image something yellow, a taste recipe something sour. The olfactory recipe, you know, is the smell of lemon. So tactile that you press it. Therefore, all of this has fit into the space of your imagination now. But Ka guided or directed the whole process of reason and scrapping. And if I didn't know what a repair is, then what? I couldn't have done it. So what? It was a wonderful answer. What is it? Wonderful. No, 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 nothing. No. I just want to understand. Maybe there is some connection with this. What? With what? A bundle. That is, this is the receptacle, and let's say, let it be in the previous chakras, that is, with some perceptions, well, it doesn't matter, gustatory, visual, or something else. I didn't quite grasp the question of what. I can't form up to the end. Okay, we'll come back a little later then. So, does anyone else have any questions? Are there any questions in touch? No, not yet.
And the basic emotion is the chakra. It turns out from the strangeness.
So let's reflect, speculate about the basic emotion. I think it's a lack of emotion. Let's reflect, let's speculate. If, once again, fear, lust, anger, possession. Well, in the sense of jealousy, possession here what?
Indifference.
Indifference. Not really. Let's leave the question open. This is due to the attachment of the trap. Communication. What other emotion do we have? What kind of emotion is there at all? Well, let's see what we are. Addiction. No, peacock. What is he doing? How to bring it all together? Well, let's leave the question. Admiration.
Not revealing yourself, appearing.
Charm. One of the facets. You understand, everything is certainly more complicated there. In general, strictly speaking, friends, of course, at our seminars it's all so galloping across Europe. And in the first approximation, but I have never met anything better than what we have. All over the internet, both Russian-speaking and non-Russian speaking. Here. It's just that something more difficult to tell you now is to overload you. But it's pointless to tell you about integral calculus there if we don't know the multiplication table. Here, but in general, strictly speaking, look, as many petals as there are so many facets of manifestation. And here there are as many as 16. Okay, well, they're writing something. Here again, here's pride, yes, but what is pride? Well, in a bad way. Self-enchantment. When you are self-charmed. Yes, Vadim Valeryevich Zaporozhtsov. Did you hear that? Here. And what does this mean? It's starting to stick out something self-explanatory. Yes, I am. Yes, yes. Okay, all right. Next.
I correctly understood that when we see something pleasant and things disappear from us, and also when something terrible happens there, or someone attacks us, we also lose our voice. That is, this was something that goes just down into the lower chakra.
The soul is in the heels, right?
Sometimes something terrible happens. That is, he is a man, he can't even say anything.
Well, yes, but sometimes it's scary that he can't even move.
Well, yes.
That is, here as a matter of fact. Well, how? Friends, once again. Here. Well, as it were now, these are the points of view on the chakras, on ancient Indian knowledge, primitivism. Here, go upstairs, there are rows of books lined up in rows. Who is there? He does not write, he who does not know how to write. Especially, of course, Americans love. Oh, that they are, there only means their own personal experience. I don't even dare to look. From time to time I'm flipped through either to laugh or to cry. Here. And so, you know, as we open, let's say, everything is somehow done, the car is somehow made. Opening this lid, right. There's a motor. And we can say in the first approximation, yeah, this is spinning here, and this is going there. Or something else. But in fact, this motor consists of thousands of units there, and so on. That's about exactly the same way we study the structure of our body in the first approximation and reaction. That is, and accordingly, you know how to say, but if I have, I turn the key, but the car doesn't go. Is this my so-and-so, or is this and this? Yes, there can be a million factors. The mouse chewed through the wire, you know. This has nothing to do with the breakdown of cars at all. Here, everything can be more complicated. And I hope that someday there will be such a link between science and yoga. Because science comes from the outside with all the pros and cons. The advantages are that it weeds out obscurantism at once. There is talk about Mahatmas, about chakras, about their damage from the eyes. They are not particularly in high esteem here. But on the other hand, science does not grasp any more subtle nuances that you can only subjectively understand. And if there is ever a connection between science and yoga, we will have a breakthrough. Okay, all right. Next. Any more questions?
Can I?
Yes, please.
Here's another thing. When we brag or are praised, yes, we tear out this head, and, as it were, I am like this. Well, it's also like if it's mine.
Well, look, are you coming today or okay not? No, you will come, but don't turn on the TV, right? Here. Pay attention, some announcers are doing some kind of reportage there. Here he has one fixed point Vishutka, and he himself is like this. That's it with the microphone. You understand, right? In other words, he concentrated on this center. There are clearly no brains. And there are no feelings either. There is, you know, a peacock's tail. And fan something there, some phrase. Sometimes it turns out well, sometimes it turns out badly. More often it's bad. Or turn on some, you know, TV shows are everywhere right now. You turn on the series, and no matter how beautifully it was shot, as soon as the squeaky voice, smoked there by some artist, everything. You want to turn it off right there. Why? Because the image and the sounds do not coincide, they are dissonant. And hop. Because, you see, yes, hearing is a higher chakra than Manipura image. Sometimes a handsome man, very handsome, but only his mouth will open everything. As all illusions also disappear in relation. You know, two students, when we study all this, methods of consciousness, yes, in fact. There is one at the Open University in senior courses. This course is called the Method of Consciousness. How to practically work with speech. In fact, the course is very difficult. It is very difficult for him to go. Here I always recommend the film My Fair Lady Once, in some 60s or something. It was shot based on the novel by Bernard Shaw. The New Pygmalion, in my opinion it is called. Here's a better look at it. Something else. That's it, right. Is there more? And let me rephrase it a little differently. All right. In other words, it turns out that I can make such a thing, that is, we can fit into this space. Only those objects with which we have been in contact in this world are called jokes. No, well, not necessarily. We can come up with some kind of object, but we can be. Why not? You know, here. And this, by the way, is a very ancient question. Let's say a horned hare. But it will be a combination of the objects that we have seen. Yeah, the hare. That is, can we, in principle, come up with something, well, what you haven't seen, to bring it there, that is, to create a kind of world out of what we have not come into contact with. No, I understand, yes. But look, yes, the answer is as follows. Here in the early 20s. At the beginning of the 20th century, there was a revolution in physics. Before that there was classical physics, after that there was quantum physics, the theory of relativity. And they began to operate with very strange things that cannot be imagined. Well, in particular, let's say an electron can move, but there is no trajectory of movement. And it turns out that. Where did this come from? From the analysis. We set up an experiment, confirm some theory there and try to imagine it. And suddenly we realize that we can't imagine. We can operate on this. Indeed, we can build an electron microscope there and that's it, and everyone can use it. Yes. But we can't imagine. Or let's say, once again, that's what. Here you are in a room, sitting in a room. According to the general theory of relativity, the space in this room is curved. The closer to the center of the Earth, the more curvature. Do you see that? No. Can you imagine that? With difficulty. And yet, let's say this GPS system, you know, these sensors, these satellites fly like they do, right? And the coordinates are determined. There, Einstein's corrections for this are included in the software, because at such a scale, and with all this, it already makes some kind of difference. Therefore, sometimes it happens that we sort of take the sixth sense organ, which is called the mind. We comprehend something and transfer it accordingly to the area of space. And sometimes it doesn't go from the sixth to the fifth. What is abstract? What do you mean? Well, I mean, what is an abstract thing of some kind? But it is not abstract, it seems to us, it is concrete. The curvature of space, as the theory of relativity teaches us, is general, it is a very concrete thing. More concrete than anything else. It seems abstract to us. But we understood this only from the realm of reason. We have never encountered this in our lives. So we can't imagine it. We kind of pulled it out from above, and are trying to push it down. Here. These moments happen very often. I am. Who does not know, I am a physicist in my first specialty. I graduated from the Moscow Engineering Physics Institute, now it is called the Nuclear University. And we have very much. I haven't seen white light there for 3.5 years at all. In general, in principle. It was mathematics and physics. Mathematics and physics. And at some point, you really plunge into this other world, into another dimension of mathematics and physics. And you know, I caught such a very strange feeling that suddenly, after the course of quantum mechanics, I suddenly began to look around in surprise. I suddenly realized that my ideas about the world were hallucinations and delusions. And it's really not like that. And it is clear that, well, as if this greatly affects the imagination later, and the revision of all their views. That's why it's a difficult question here. That is, it's not necessarily imagination, it's that. What we have already encountered. We can, as it were, deduce something with the help of reason. The mind is already another level. This is a different level, a higher one, yes. This is the Ajna chakra, yes. Well, it turns out that we are trying to cram from the Ajna chakra level, so I understood that just as much from the lower levels is possible. That is, as a certain. That's just like a certain one. Yes, and actually has a very good question asking why. Because there is such yoga. The most magnificent yoga. It's just that the one who has mastered it, one can say, begins to live in a new way. It's called visualization yoga. Visualization yoga. We have a very nice course on the website of the Tochka Open Yoga Tochka.ru course. In fact, it is a very strong course. This is a continuation of the axiomatics of yoga, by and large. So, there is a technique there, how to really work with visualization images. And where is the edge of pairing what your ordinary senses perceive with your visualization? And where are the boundaries of your visualization? What you can visualize in principle, and what you can't. And you know, a lot after that it becomes clear, say, in the same India, when you come there. Why they experienced this or that experience, which seems strange to us. Here. But we are already moving away. So wonderful, friends. Time. Yeah. It's time to do something practical. So, well, click. So, this is the second part of the Samina Rabina Chakra. Today is the 21st of December, 2000 of the 14th of the 12th year. My name is Vadim Zaporozhtsov, Mikhail Kolesnik and I, so we are conducting this seminar. So, we stopped at the questions. There were some questions there, and then we lost contact.
Yes, there are 2 questions.
And let's answer these questions, and go further. Yeah, come on, read me the questions. While looking for questions, who has any questions in the audience? Does anyone understand anything? Today, Misha and I discussed what other practice to give you, Pash, on Chuck. There is generally a great practice to hammer a nail into the wall with the third eye with your head. Preferably with this hat to the wall. Yes, I found a question. Anna Zhishny. When a person's Ajna chakra function improves, how does it manifest itself in his daily life? And how can this be understood from the outside? Which means? Yes, here's the question. What does it mean it's getting better? Look, this is the ideology here. So, we remember when the world was created. First there was the principle of reason. Well, there were a lot of things there before that. And then the principle of reason, the principle of space, and so on. Up to the principle of the earth were created. The same thing, friends, happens when you are born in this universe. That is, when you enter this world. This process is identical to the process of creation of the universe. Only your small inner universe. And you begin to create your own principle of mind, the principle of space, and so on. And then, your personal principle of space is, as it were, docked with the universal principle of space. But it remains in such a latent or dormant state. In primitive forms of animals, and as evolution progresses, development goes, as it were, directly in the opposite direction. That is, it was created from the principle of reason to the principle of the earth, and in evolutionary terms, development and mastery goes in the opposite direction, from the principle of the earth to the principle of reason. Thus, there are living beings that you will not find in our understanding of the mind. Some kind of creatures. In short, the infusoria is a slipper, friends. You will find living beings who, in general, have a central or whatever it is, a nervous system already. And in general, at least some first glimpses of cell differentiation. Cells on cells, there say body cells, nerve cells have already been observed. Then there are living beings who already have this structure, more or less organized, say, an earthworm. It cannot be said that he is a great intellectual, but he shows a certain intelligence. But in any case, what is instinct? Instinct is some kind of initial information that has been somehow mastered, taken into account, and which is then applied. That is, the first basics or the first glimpses of reason. Well, I'm not going to have such complicated topics now, but even simpler topics. And here. Then we have with you there, let's say there are animals, birds, cats, dogs. But they also have a mind, friends. There is a mind. Yes, he is not up to human about something, but in his own way, the mind is very strong. Then we have people with you. People are different too, you know. There are people who are not distinguished by special intelligence, right? And there are people who have intelligence rushing out of all the cracks. Here. Sometimes in a good way, sometimes in a bad way. So, in fact, we are, as they say, building a more and more perfect system, using the principle of reason, or Ajna Chakra. That's the moment when we fully, 100% use one or another principle, achieve perfection. This moment, it says, is identical to the fact that you have fully mastered the chakra, put it under control, and learned to use it 100%. But it happens in different ways. That is, roughly speaking, everyone has the same Ajna Chakra. Only we are aware of it in different ways and have different ways to use it. So, what is the distinguishing feature of the fact that a person has learned to use the principle of reason, or the Ida chakra? First of all, he shows his intellectual power strong. This is the criterion by which you can evaluate. But how is it visible to others? Well, according to the degree to which this power is strong. In general, this is the way to talk about how this or that chakra works. That sometimes I hear such nonsense, they say, this person's Ajna chakra is closed. What do they mean by that? Or there, his Anahata is closed. Opanki. Is it that he has no tactile sensations, or what? Well, you know, it's a matter of terminology. Therefore, since it is now a young science, the adaptation of knowledge, therefore there is no such vocabulary that has been formed. And sometimes there is this substitution of concepts. So, was there another question? Now, just a second. Therefore, it manifests itself as intellectual power and strength. Therefore, if we begin to get smarter, then one way or another, we will activate the Ajna chakra. And it can be seen even from the outside. Well, that is what I want to say. If some smart guy comes and says that he has Ajna chakra, it means that it is awakened. The third eye is open. Everyone, the third eye's open everything, and at the same time, he is stupid as a stump. Then you have to understand that there is either one or the other. You know, the third eye is open, and you're a fool. So either the third eye is closed. So, yes. Question, right. Yes, there was a question. Once again, I answered you. Our personal principle of reason, which is formed at birth, is again not the human mind, but our prince, not the anti-prince. In general, we got confused with the terminology here, in my opinion. No, look, one more time. When the universe was created, one of the first principles that the Absolute created was the principle of reason. Then, the Absolute created us in his image and likeness. Each of our births is equivalent to the creation of our small personal inner universe. And there, too, everything begins with the principle of reason. Then these principles are integrated, mind on mind and space on space, and so on to the principle of the earth. And we have an embodied body when our inner universe is connected to the outer universe. Or our microcosm is connected to the macrocosm. Here, that's what is meant. Okay, now, just a second. Yes, one at a time. Yes.
I have such a question. If in the yoga of dreams or in the nidra of yoga, we concentrate just on the jina, on the chakra, and in dream yoga, for example, do we pass through it into another space, like the space of dreams, for example?
Well, there are actually different techniques. Sometimes, on the contrary, he advises to focus on the throat center when falling asleep, on the principle of space is considered. That's the question. Look, in such yogas, such as dream yoga, there is a slightly different principle involved. Your task is to introduce prana into the central channel. As soon as you have to have a surplus of prana for this. If you don't have an excess of prana, you will never get a lucid dream. So, the first is an excess of prana. The second is a combination of factors, when this excess is somehow directly or indirectly introduced into the central channel. And, in fact, each of the chakras has a hole through which prana can be injected into the central channel. And four different techniques, for different means and purposes, different chakras are used. Of course, since we have the principle of reason, it is higher than the principle of space, respectively, controls. Then some things are much easier to do from the level of ajna than lower principles. This, by the way, applies to everything else. And the remaining other practices, and the remaining other chat. That's right, there was another question. Yes. From whom? I have. Yes. Now. Yeah, just a second. Come on.
And about how the mind works, how to develop the mind.
Yes.
Let's say, well, it is generally known that many people work with reason precisely through concentration.
Yes.
And the question is this: if we concentrate exactly like this, it is in this plan that we work with the mind, will we break it to such an extent that there will be no need to engage in logical thinking?
Yes, absolutely right. You have noticed very well. Patanjali's system is based on this. So, there is the so-called Yoga Sutra Patanjali, the eightfold system of Patanjali or Ashtanga system, and the barbell is 8, where just at certain stages, the last 3 stages, which together are called sanyama, offer you to approach the achievement of superstate. Through working with the mind through concentration.
Подойти к достижению сверхсостояния через работу с разумом посредством концентрации.
That is, when you hold only one object or idea in your mind and do not pay attention to others. Gradually, the degree of your attention and concentration is growing. You can do this only in one case: your principle of reason develops or hones in direct proportion. Therefore, strictly speaking, to a certain extent, it is possible to equate the sharpening of the mind with the ability to concentrate and hold one's thought on one object or phenomenon. Here, imagine you are studying there somewhere, as in my case it was there. I entered MEFI after school. And there's a completely different load after school, and higher mathematics went. And she went, you know, such a good higher mathematics went. Not bad. I don't know how it is now. Then higher mathematics went very well, starting with such completely abstract concepts, moments, and so on. And I remember, there was a blow to the brain. I did not graduate from physics and mathematics schools. I graduated from an ordinary school in a provincial city, thousands of kilometers from the capital. You understand, right? And then such a blow, you know, to the brain. And what worked? That despite the load, you still keep your mind on one thing. At the expense of prana, at the expense of excess prana, you concentrate, meditate, reflect on one topic. And due to this, I managed to reduce the failures in education at the time. They were very big, because I didn't study there at all until the 8th grade. I walked and ran around the fields there. I don't know, I led a free lifestyle there. You know how it is, Tom Sawyer. Here. And then it became necessary to study, and the missed years must be compensated somehow. And so it was necessary to compensate for them precisely by concentrating. That is, since you're watching, you don't understand. You don't understand. Attention starts jumping, getting distracted. It's hard for him to be on one. Well, it's hard, you know what? The first time you see, you don't understand, and so on. Consciousness jumps. That's if something. Look here, then the second step. Then you get used to it. And already these formulas, all these integrals, differentials there, and so on no longer seem so scary. Take this, open some textbook of higher mathematics, but you will be horrified that there is a Chinese letter drawn there. And then it ceases to be a Chinese letter, but on the contrary, it caresses the eye. The gaze caresses. That is, you get used to it. Why? Because you keep your attention for a long time, and over time the habituation goes. As soon as there is a habit of retention, the meaning slowly begins to reach. Because, according to the axiomatics of yoga, if you hold your consciousness by concentrating on any object or phenomenon, that is, any object or phenomenon fully shows its content to the consciousness that is directed at it. Strictly speaking, the process of thinking and the thought of education is a process that allows you to keep consciousness on the selected object of the phenomenon. And the answer that we get to the question, it comes through thoughts due to the degree of concentration. And so it turns out, here the sign of equality stands between the ability to concentrate and the ability to develop the Ajna chakra. If you are able to concentrate and hold your consciousness on any chosen arbitrary object or phenomenon for more than 3 hours, as it is written in some books on yoga, you enter a superconscious state, the so-called state of samadhi. This is just a harbinger of what we talked about at the beginning of the seminar. After that, the next stage of higher intuition or direct comprehension begins. Here, therefore, it is absolutely correct, due to the concentration of consciousness, due to the concentration of attention. You indirectly begin to hone the mind. How is this achieved in schools and institutes? You take a book, go to the library, sit down, wherever no one interferes with you, open it and force yourself to concentrate. Different periods pass. Sometimes there comes, the effect of a white sheet. You seem to be reading, but it seems to you that you are reading. Your thoughts have flown somewhere. You have to catch this moment and return it. Your thoughts are like monkeys jumping, and you are theirs. Like cockroaches are spreading, and you're raking them. As soon as concentration on a chosen object, phenomenon, formula, say in mathematics, or an idea, reaches a certain stability, objects or phenomena are comprehended by you, and you acquire knowledge. You understand, right? Here. So yes? And then, in general, Patanjali begins wonderfully. Here we were talking about a wolf today, which was driven with the help of red rags, poor, and shot at the corners. Here. And in Patanjali, in fact, the negative effect of our karma on us, he reduced with mathematical precision to the situation with the wolf. That is, in fact, all the action of our negative karma just goes according to the scenario when we are faced with a new situation. But because of negative experience, we begin to confuse it with the old situation that led to suffering. We already start behaving incorrectly in the new situation. And thus we only make our condition heavier. And it turns out that due to the concentration of meditation on one selected object or phenomenon, you can significantly weaken the so-called sanskaras, or these little flags, with which I am already driving your way to the slaughter. And you can, like that old wolf, jump, and run away, so into the free forests. This is called a liberation situation. Now, if you jump over all these rags, you will reach the state of Jivan Mukta, free during your lifetime. You will no longer have any sanskara imprints on the surface of your mind. Mizaya, the good one. Poor Mizaya. What's that? I drank it all up. Here. So this is a very good remark, parallel with yoga in the morning and shuk. Someone else had something. Yes, please. It is this term purity of mind that is polluted. Yes, purity of mind, yes, and here are the questions. Who is in touch with us? Friends, do you remember?
The concentration is on you. Kanzen.
Okay, fine. So, look. The biggest one. The big problem I faced in yoga is the lack of adequate vocabulary. Lack of adequate definitions. Yes, let's say we don't translate the word yoga. Yoga remained. But let's say the word reason. We say reason. We suspect our mind. Well, now each of you has a mind. Here. For us, we put a sign of reason. Mind, brain. We're not brainless idiots out there, are we? Yes. Here. And so on. But when you begin to explore these structures, what we call the mind is divided into 3 parts. Manas, as if, buddhi and chitta. That's exactly the same with the concepts of pollution purity. Well, let's start with the fact that there is nothing clean and nothing dirty in this world. It can be appropriate or inappropriate. The sand on the beach is appropriate and clean. The same sand on the hostess's kitchen table or in your soup chowder pollutes her.
С похлебки с супом
You understand, right? That is, the question is where is that sometimes? A matter of dirt and cleanliness. This is on the one hand. That is, when you are full of impressions, your mind is full of idiotic impressions. Well, there are people who are insane. This is what they have in the jungle. There is a jungle in their head. Sometimes such people come to us to study and, well, there, you know, there's a double job. First, these jungles need to be cut down, and they are not so easy to cut down. There are also dangerous tigers there. Here. And then so something new there. And that's why sometimes old ideas are idiotic. Idiotic ideas, they pollute different ones. To give such an example, such a characteristic one. Some people think that money is bad. God be with him, with money this is not the worst thing. What is the last thing here? Something was so perfect. Here I am now. Something to do with the hair. Here is from a series of the fact that you will often wash your hair. You will wash off your prana, or something like that.
And here's an interesting thing. I was recently told that you can't go to the shower after yoga for 40 minutes. That you take pictures of yourself as.
From the same series, yes, that yogs don't wash. Why? They are this. Information is protected. Saving up, yes. To the point that it is impossible to approach them to stink. Here. You understand, right? That's a lot of such nonsense. Plenty of it. Starting from where? Somewhere in the book I didn't read it critically. Or, oh, I don't have to do anything there today. Why? But in the Tibetan horoscope it says so. And a person really builds his life according to what? And then he finds out that this horoscope was not for that year. You know, this is doubly insulting, right? Yes, that means. And there are a lot of things like that. Here. Therefore, first of all, it is the purity of the mind, it is the ability to concentrate on one thing. There are people who can't. They start talking about one thing with them, and they have a jump. Here I used to start lecturing, take me away from something. Led away, right. Jump. Yes. He began in health, remember how he finished for the repose. And it is clear that this is, you know, the inability to concentrate. That is such a sloppy one. Sometimes this impression is confusing. Or the installations are very different there. Is it correct to say that it is the mind that concentrates? What? Is it correct to say that the mind concentrates? And with the help of reason, it just happens. Concentration comes from what our higher self is in the illusion. Well, look, let's do this, yes. Yes, there is such a thing as the axiomatics of yoga. A good thing. And there is partly a continuation of this topic, which your humble servant once revealed in a yoga visualization course. And there is a more detailed diagram of the process that occurs in thinking, for example. It consists in the fact that the flow of prana from your higher self passes through such a mind, which is called chitta. And this flow basically works as consciousness. It perceives. Here we will then read in these passages, in these texts. It is simply an observer, a witness, a perceiver. On the other hand, it perceives a certain area related to the mind, which is called buddhi. It is a kind of substance where thought forms are formed. And so it turns out that our higher self, it concentrates on a thought or thought form on the surface of our buddhi. Buddhi is like, you know, ripples on the water. And where do thought forms come from? They get caught. What pushes us to generate a thought form in a booth? Of course, first of all, these are the objects and phenomena of our world that we encounter. Our sense organs, they give information. This information somehow passes into our mind, and forms an accurate picture of what they perceived.
что они восприняли.
And this is the picture we are exploring. That is, in a sense, we do not see the world, we see it from the picture that our mind draws. And there are two things. First of all, this picture may be, well, as if it has nothing to do with what it really is.
Потому что есть на самом деле.
Somewhere the signal distortion has passed. And on the other hand, we have such a leapfrog of these pictures that we don't know which one to look at. And as a result, everything gets mixed up in such a mess. This is the problem of modern websites. By the way, partly ours. You open 1,025,000 of these, as it were, messages, banners. Everything is flashing there, everything is calling, buy, come in. Here. Especially these commercial obsessive ones, yes there. That's all the time, right. As a result, your consciousness dissipates in an even layer, and you do not understand anything, close the site, and take it away. A good website is made like this. Here's a lot of empty space, as well as good advertising.
Как и хорошая реклама.
And a few pieces on the fingers of the main topics so that your consciousness is not sprayed, but, well, more or less concentrated on similar topics.
Более или менее концентрировалась на сходные темы.
And God forbid you to change the interface. It memorizes the mind. Well, imagine how all the signs would be changed in higher mathematics. Mathematicians have gone crazy. Right now, some of our Microsoft took it without declaring war and changed everything right. Some kind of Windows has been released now. Do you know how it ended? A failure. And nobody buys the issue. To force the brain to retrain. Here you have moved a button from one place to another, if you measure the prana that goes to retrain the whole globe. This is the budget of such an average country.
Земного шара. Это бюджет такой средний.
Do you understand?
Понимаете, можно
You can do nothing at all but create with this energy. Unfortunately, who does it here? With us. Well, not professionals are engaged in design. There should be a lot of conservatism here, you know. I've already taught someone something once, without forcing them to retrain. Because it will end badly for your wallet. Here. And where did we start?
С чего мы начали?
I have everything, I have already carried me.
Понесло меня.
Yes, so I am sending everyone interested to the site of the OpenYogaClass.com to the appropriate course, which is called Visualization Yoga.
Курс, который называется йога-визуализация.
There's a more detailed explanation of how our mind is made. We are going to touch on it a little more now, but there is more detailed. So, any more questions? Yes, please.
When a person starts doing yoga, he actually pumps himself up with prana, right, and it develops accordingly. All abilities develop with all the success of both the body and the mind, and so on, that a person ends. But at some moments, when, it would seem, the most unprepared person does not realize himself. Let's say, at the moment of falling asleep, the mind begins, well, roughly speaking, to bully. That is, here's a bunch of thoughts. A swarm of thoughts prevents you from falling asleep, and if you don't put it in order, roughly speaking, you don't start saying that there is no. Here we have a program, we are sleeping now, and so on. That is, you are doing some kind of concentration, or something else. Then, under the influence of the fact that there is a lot of prana in you, this cosmogony begins, which interferes with merit.
No, well, that's not exactly a lot of prana. It just might be others. Just maybe from a small amount of prana, which the mind sucks out of its last strength. You know, mind control is really compared to controlling a monkey.
С управлением обезьян.
Try to obey the monkey.
Того, подчиняться.
That is, the mind behaves either like a small child. You start taking away his toy, such a howl will raise.
Вой-вой поднимет.
Now do an experiment, try it normally. You will now get a concert before the end of the seminar, but I assure you, it will take exactly 3 minutes. Before the toy that now made up the meaning of life will be thrown away, and the next toy will come in its place. This is how we switch attention, and it becomes important to us.
Становится нам важным.
And in fact, the training of our mind is to control this switching process.
Нашего разума заключается в том, чтобы управлять этим процессом переключения.
Here in an open yoga university, you can immediately see which student is worth what. who can stay on one topic for a long time and say yoga, and who can't. Why? Because when there is a novelty, it is easy for the mind to grasp it. But the true refinement of the mind is not to grasp the new, but to hold on to the old. Our mind is made like this: one new interesting, oh, through. Second, oh, I quit. Third, he threw it. As a result, we know about everything and nothing. And the true control of the mind is when we, here is one, it is one. Our thoughts are drawn to the side. Think about that, about Sima, the fifth, the 10th. But we don't. We think about what we need to think about. The mind resists it. We must ignore him, develop our will. Then, really, thoughts have another such dangerous thing. They begin to connect emotions. Abstractly, friends, it's very easy to fight with thoughts. But it's almost impossible to fight thoughts that are pumped up with emotions. You can. Here's a typical example of such a frequent, well, in different variations. Are you going to work? Well, yes, I'm going to work. All right, that's it today. What did I do this morning? Well, yes, I ate there, stroked something there. Iron. Do you understand? That's it. And that's what it is right away. Maybe they turned it off, but only you didn't have time to remember it, and the thought came that you hadn't turned it off. And the emotion was pumped up, and the emotion begins to overshadow your memory. And so, and you are already in doubt, but did you turn it off, or did you not turn it off? If you thought without emotion, how would you go through the chain? Yes, well, how did I not turn it off, if I cleaned the table there on which it was standing? I mean, did he fall or something? Yes. Well, there, for example, yes. And if there is some emotion that your house is already burning there, then everything is completely confused in your head there. And here are parasitic thoughts, they use it. That is, as soon as the thought is connected to the emotion, and the emotion connects through you the former negative experience, you become an easy prey in the hands of any thought, and the mind controls and plays with you like a cat with a mouse. So there are some of them here. How can I tell you? Exercises on working with the Ajna chakra, on working with the mind. If you want to control the mind, disconnect it from emotions. As long as he enters into your emotional structures. Oh, this is a nightmare. That the mind includes emotions. Emotions splash adrenaline into the blood, and this is objective chemistry. You are already objectively shaking. And this vicious circle needs to be broken. It was a good scheme when we lived in the bodies of animals, because there was no time to think about whether a tiger or not a tiger. It was necessary to get away as quickly as possible. And for this, as much adrenaline as possible was needed. And this mechanism, it has shown itself perfectly in life, in the bodies of animals. But in the human body, he plays a bad service with us. That's why they say that if you follow the path of emotions, these emotions will lead you to hell there. Whatever it is, fear or seduction, whatever. It is for this reason that it turns out that, in fact, working with the mind is, of course, certainly concentration. It is certainly keeping thoughts on one thing, but it is very difficult to keep thoughts on one thing. As long as your feelings pump up your thoughts. You know, I have sometimes asked why half the world is interested in football. My dad was such a fan of Spartak, fanatical, he turned on the TV there with a gasp, so it means not to miss it. I asked myself, well, it would be nice if you played football yourself. So no, you're sitting on the sofa, so you're a borscht, so you're eating, and watching how 20 people, 24 heads are chasing one ball back and forth. Or how many of them there are, it doesn't matter. 22 millionaires are chasing one ball. Yes. That's a good joke, yes. Soj. Question. Why is football interesting? Why are people interested in football if they don't even play it? The answer is as follows. In its original form, it has nothing to do with their real life. Because if you start thinking about something that has to do with your real life, fear or something else will be added to the thought, to the excitement.
К азарту будет прибавляться страх или еще что-то.
And here is something completely abstract, which is interesting, logical, exciting. But on what can you switch from your normal life, full of stress and emotions, to a parallel plane, where, in fact, nothing depends on you, but there is something, some kind of action even.
Тут какое-то действие такое даже
And emotions are moderately controlled. Here. And it brings rest. Because in normal life, these emotions would devour you. And there are emotions, well, yes, they are sometimes pleasant, sometimes less pleasant when the team lost. But not so as to die. Here. Or there's stamp collecting, or something. Here's some kind of thing that is not related to your world, in some ideal world, living according to its own rules, in which the mind is absorbed, it is interesting to him, but the degree of emotional involvement there is minimal.
ему интересно, но степень вовлечения эмоционального там минимальна.
That's when it's interesting.
Интересно.
If,
Если же
well, as a rule, look, I remember when I was little. Let's say I was little, I was interested in watching films about the war. Well, boy, of course, I'm playing. Why? Because it doesn't mean anything to me. And try somehow to plant a normal veteran to watch. Yes, how to remember that some kind of nightmare was happening. And here again, they show some gangster TV series there.
бандитский сериал.
Friends, I assure you, if you really get in touch with bad bandits once, you will just be sick of this topic alone. That it even exists on planet Earth.
От одной этой темы, что это вообще есть на планете Земля.
All these investigators, all these cops out there, all these showdowns. If you plunge into this abomination at least once in your life, with your good karma, you will
Окунетесь в эту мерзость,
say, no, this is not my universe. This is a parallel universe, and I am to it. I don't even want to know at all. Do you understand? Yes.
Computer games, for example.
Computer games, absolutely right. So, all right, we're off to the side again. Wonderful. Once again, we read the texts, analyze them. Come on, Mish, come on with Yandra. Yes, well done, you reminded me. Let's point the camera at the pit. And we have it all visible to everyone. It is visible to everyone. Except, sit down here, explain. While I'm having tea drops. Oh, well. We have such a wonderful yantra, which just reflects what is described in Rooney's Sharkana.
То, что описывается в шарчаках Нирупани,
It is said that two petals, here they are on the edge, that there is a bija mantra, here it is in the middle of such a sign.
вот она в серединке такой знак.
More precisely, not even but a M here. I'll tell you about it later. There is our goddess actually, with 6 heads, with her attributes.
Собственно, 6 головами с атрибутами своими.
There is also a lingam, that is, there is where this god is placed in our Parma Shiva.
Наш Парама Шива.
Well, you take the text directly, read it from the text and show it. This is also not particularly convenient, to be honest. According to the text, the one whose mind is steadily fixed on this lotus, that the breath is controlled by fluff, has the power to pass through the 3 worlds. Neither Brahma, nor Vishnu, nor Hari, Hera, Shiva, nor Suda, nor Ganapati are unable to resist the beautiful white density similar to the moon called Aina. Well, here it is, of course, painted with petals not that white, but we fixed it. In theory, it should be white. Immediately we painted it white. He shines with the glory of drunkenness, the Hakini minds are inside him. Here are our 6-headed Hakini minds. His 6 faces are like many moons. That is, such beautiful moon faces. She has 6 arms, we have 4, but in fact, I'm going to tell you about the other 2. In one of them, in which she holds a book, the other 2 are raised up, a position of averting fear, giving good. With the rest of her hands, she holds a skull, a small drum, and a bouquet of roses. But also a bouquet of roses, here the flower is just a vacation. Her creation is pure. In other words, we see, yes, that its creation is pure, that is, it does not exist at all in principle. That is, there were 2 chakras in all of them, God and Goddess, God and Goddess. Lathati still had a lingam in 2 chakras, and Anahate has a lingam, that is, these are the same grankas. The so-called ones that have already been discussed, which means, but certain places where Maya is particularly strong, or where we will need to pass them, that is, make some efforts, especially important ones. That is, for example, in Muladhara, that it is necessary to realize this center at all, first of all. Secondly, it is the center that, in general, it is necessary to awaken this energy. That is, in general, it is necessary, roughly speaking, to think even differently, that there is energy there that needs to be awakened, that needs to be raised, that needs to be somehow done with it, worked with, yes. In other words, this is the first step. The second step is when we rise to the level of Anahata. In other words, this snake is depicted there in the form of a girl, that is, already a goddess. That is, she has the appearance of a beautiful goddess. That is, it is no longer a snake that crawled up, but which is already a beautiful girl. Here, well, these feelings appear, this sense of unity and so on. Yes, and usually people start to slow down on it too. They become so blissful, and already think that they have realized everything. We are all good, we will feed everyone. And we will walk around smiling happily. But it wasn't there. There is also the following. That is, even if we pass it and understand that we need to sharpen our mind. We are climbing higher, and we are already honing this mind, that is, this is the next graph. And that it is, even if we sharpened it, it is on 2 ends, a stick on 2 ends. We begin to hone, and immediately we begin to dive, as Vadim told us, into some kind of world. Then we begin to drive ourselves into some kind of cage. And we have already given up, and it is not a joy for us to start life. There is no meaning in life, because Azina, again, the mind cannot answer what is the meaning of life, and a person begins to get lost in it all. And yoga calls, of course, to go further. Here. And, actually, here is our goddess, who was in the hut of the ugly girl presented, rose up, and became such a Parmashiva. Androgenically, she will be here. That is, on the one hand, it is a girl, and on the other hand, it is a man. That is, we know that the light of consciousness, it shines here as clearly as possible, as strongly as possible. That is, there is practically no energy as such here, and it is already merging together. And here the duality of being is born. That is, here the division into good and bad, into right and wrong, male and female begins. And, in fact, this is what she personifies. This goddess looks like this. And the fact that the one who overcomes, even on the chaga, he connects, and there is no duality above. There is one cognition, roughly speaking, of oneself or the higher self. Or we will continue to pass. There actually are also their own steps. But it's a little different there. In other words, in order to pass the steps further, we will need to turn on the mind and go further with pure knowledge without thinking. Both of these gods of ours have snakes hanging from them, goddesses and God. What do these snakes represent? It's like our thought forms. They envelop us all the time, and our task is to learn to control them so that they become our friends, and not those who drive us down our path, yes, like our wolves. Paramashiva's right side holds a trident, which means that he completely puts the tribunes under control, that is, the guna of sattva, the guna of rajas, the guna of tamas, that is, such a guna of inertia, stupidity, the guna of rajas. That is, it is such activity, and the third, when the guna of clarity, and we understand everything. But even further, we are even higher still rises above them, and holds them in his hand.
активности. Ну и третий сатва, это когда ты как бы на ясности, и мы же все понимаем, вот, но и дальше нам нужно даже выше еще подниматься над ними и держать в руке.
Well, what can I tell you? And the second hand, in theory, it should eliminate obstacles. In different treatises, again, it was different. Either he keeps a drum there, or he removes obstacles. Here it just hangs for some reason. The next one is the goddess. That is, this is what? Well, what kind of energy, that is, how we will behave, roughly speaking, when we rise to this level. And what actions do we need to perform in order to rise higher, to possess qualities? She holds a drum in one hand. The Shiva drum is such a small drum in which a rhythm is created. Yes, it's called. A rhythm is created in which Rita lives, in which any higher being should live, feeling the rhythm in this life. In another hand, she holds a skull, again a symbol of renunciation, as in the lower one, in almost all of them she held. But a mudra that bestows a blessing, that is, removes an obstacle. It also talks about 6 hands, and here you can too. Often she is depicted in a mudra that removes obstacles, grants fearlessness, and in one she holds either a book or a clear one. A symbol of concentration, a symbol of gaining knowledge. In short, that's probably all. That is, if the next time we see an image like this, then we should understand that what the chakra has, the Ajna chakra. We should immediately understand what's what.
Misha, question, do you say anything about 6 heads? Why 6 heads?
6 heads are actually, they increase each time the chakra increases. In other words, it turns out, roughly speaking, another energy begins to work. That is, the head is, for example, a Muladhara, that is, it is the most primordial impulse of energy, which is not yet dual, which is primordial, and so on. Then above, we move on to Svadhisthana, and we have another such world, the inner world. Here are the children, when they grow up, they have some kind of inner world. That is, they rise higher, it turns out that they have an external one, but there is some kind of internal one. And so on. They begin to rise, and different layers of energy are formed, well, roughly speaking. Package. Yes. And what does the flower mean? Flower, yes, a good question. I missed it. The flower means unaffected, actually. Any more questions? Yeah. Wonderful. Great. So, you know, these 6 heads were associated with 5 feelings when they talked about that. 6th. Yes, maybe. Yes, friends, you have to understand, you know, here's the difficulty. But all the attributes are non-verbal. Let's say that the trident is wider, there's Shiva with a trident, see, standing, right. They have so many justifications, I can't tell you. Every yoga school has something different. Someone says, trident, it means there are 3 worlds. Someone says it's Sushumnaya Ida and Pingala, someone else. And so literally for each of these. And do you know what a very interesting thing is? When you start practicing yoga, purely practical, these symbols always loom before your eyes. And so you did some kind of asana, and something came to you, and you mentally, as it were, oh, so this is how this, that is drawn there. And then you think to yourself, is it really so or did it seem to you? Yes, here. And therefore, in fact, here are such explanations. What does it mean? You can meet a lot. Mass. It is impossible to say that they are all right or all wrong there. They are, well, like this method to teach you to think abstractly. Abstractly. Okay, all right. So what do we have? You can read the texts again here. Texts, texts, texts. It is in such details. Yes, let's start with the details now. In general. Well, let's go back to the Chakranir. By suggestion and comment. The Yujin, whose mind is firmly fixed on this lotus, whose breath is controlled by Kuaka, has the power to pass through the three worlds. Here, let's take it apart. Let's take it apart. So, there is one who can concentrate his consciousness on the Ajna chakra, and then a bundle with breathing. Kumbhaka breath. What is Kumbhaka? Well, in an allegorical sense, it's a delay. And in a purely practical sense, sometimes it's when you make a delay in inhaling, and you have a pitcher-shaped stomach. One of the meanings of the word kumha is like a jug. And then look at what a very interesting technique, practice is born on this. If you master pranayama at the expense of kumbhaka on inspiration, and the direction of consciousness to the center of the third eye of the Ajna chakra, you can approach such a very interesting phenomenon. You have, as it were, such a wave, first of all, the expansion of blood vessels. And that in itself, you know, just starts to swim before my eyes. Try to stand up abruptly. But this is not enough. There is also an effect when a small amount of the finest prana enters the central channel through Ajna. And you didn't just have everything floating, but you flew out. It's a completely phantasmagoric feeling. I mean me. Somehow. I had one friend. There was only one student, but he has such a complicated background. He dabbled in drugs at one time. And somehow he managed to do this exercise. He said the drugs were resting. That is, the degree of euphoria of the experience is even somewhere higher, but in terms of negative consequences, like heaven and earth. You understand, right? The exact opposite. In other words, there are, you know, such sets of euphoric practices. Sometimes they are abused, sometimes in all kinds of breathing practices. I've come across some. Hyperventilation of the lungs is going on. They breathe, 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 then pop, and that's it. And disconnected. You know, such a rough version of forced reality. This, of course, is abused because it is not very good. It strains all structures. And it's not a fact that, again, the same effect can be achieved. If in reality, with the help of meditation and pranayama, prana is forced to enter the central channel, then you have the power of self-awareness of yourself to overcome all obstacles that you can only meet in this world or in all three worlds. Neither Brahma, Vishnu, nor Hari, Hera, Shiva, nor Suraka are able to resist him. And then look, there is an opposition of the power of the gods. Shiva, Brahma, Vishnu. You remember, the Hindus are, in general, very touching people with regard to religion. They have all religions everywhere and, accordingly, the life of a mortal is entirely determined by the action of the gods, who can reward or curse there. Well, in this regard, it is said that if you have risen to the level of reason, then you have risen above the level of all the concepts that can only be defining your life. And, accordingly, no one can influence you anymore. Next. A beautiful white lotus in a similar moon is called as much. Here it is described as a beautiful white lotus.
Как прекрасный белый лотос.
In general, in fact, there are sometimes differences in the description, and sometimes disputes arise, the origin of the word aina, because it is consonant with two things.
Знаете, двум таким вещам.
Is like denying the bottom on knowledge. Knowledge with such a capital letter, knowledge of the wow.
Ого-го.
That is, as if starting from this level, it's like we have differentiated knowledge, really, when we divide everything into I not me. Here I am, and there I am not. After all, if you figure it out, imagine, yes, where you end, the surrounding universe begins.
Заканчиваетесь вы, начинается окружающая вселенная.
How can you tell? At first glance, it's very simple. Here they touched me, aha. That's it. That wasn't me there. That's when they touched me, I'm already there. And imagine, they gave you an analgesic injection. They touch you, but you don't care if I'm not me. And this is how you can pass through all the senses.
Таким образом можно проходить по всем органам чувств.
Touch, smell, vision, so this is echolocation due to hearing.
Это эхолокация за счет слуха,
Yes.
да?
But all the same, sooner or later, friends, such a single boundary of yourself or not self will be revealed. It's the mind.
Вашего я или не я. Это разум.
Visualization yoga is built on this. As a matter of fact, the way you look is, in general, a random hallucination, if you call things by their proper names.
Вещи называть своими именами.
That's how it happened by chance. Your mind perceives itself this way and that, and shapes itself this way and that. But no one prevents you from forming yourself in another body at this level. And this is what yoga visualization is built on. Quite interesting exercises. We need to learn to visualize ourselves in different bodies. And a person must learn to visualize himself in the body of, say, an animal or in the body of some object and identify himself.
И отождествлять себя.
So, what is it? Stomach. So,
Значит,
it means this.
это
And you see, it turns out that, in fact, such a fundamental misconception, such, you know, clearly expressed for an already embodied person, begins with the level of reason.
человека начинается с уровня разума.
Of course, the deepest delusion begins at the level when your higher self begins to consider itself its own prana, just as a person begins to consider himself his own shadow. My hand. Here. And somehow here is the most vivid, this process of separation into I and not I, where I end, where the surrounding universe begins.
Вселенная окружающая.
Good or evil or whatever.
Или еще какая-нибудь
In fact, this is the level of the principle of reason.
принцип разума.
That's sometimes how the origin of the word aina is explained.
Мгновение слова.
Although I'm not sure there aren't others. Mine for what?
Знаю, что такое. Да.
You don't want to. Well, also, as an option, there is the same explanation, only the opposite way up. If we rise higher, then we overcome this everyday knowledge, being, and we have aina, the highest knowledge, which there is no knowledge.
Высшее знание, которое вне знания, а само прямое такое
Understanding.
понимание.
Well. We protect, we take care, otherwise we now have assistance without yoga. On its two petals are the letters X and X, which are also white, which increases the beauty of this lotus. Here. Look here. Remember, all the previous chakras had petals with different numbers of petals and different letters.
Разными буквами.
And here at Woodruff, remember, we read that 50 letters of the Sanskrit alphabet end with these letters.
Санскритского алфавита.
In other words, these are some kind of vibrations that are somehow consonant with these two letters, from which it is possible to compose. From all the remaining ones as well, all words, objects, phenomena of the universe. This is also a topic for reflection. And you remember that in each chakra before that there was a so-called bija mantra, or the mantra responsible for.
Ответственная за
How can I tell you, for the origin of the principle?
изменение принципа.
And here too, there are quite complex interpretations.
Бывают интерпретации
What kind of bija mantra corresponds to the Aina chakra?
на чакры.
It says here